So hi everyone, just wanted to show you what the next step is in my project about the NASA mission that we're doing some music and a video production about using NASA images. And it's really been quite the project, and we're coming down to the wire. I've got recording sessions scheduled, and what I have to do right now is get ready to make recordings of the final three movements, which are actually the middle part of this composition. And right now I'm rehearsing, doing some basic rehearsing. This is just the piano part for one of the movements, and I've been working on the three that still need to be recorded. And this particular bit, the way I did this is I composed the choir parts first. I wanted a certain flow in the harmonization, and I wanted the choir to really have the melody on this one. And my solo soprano is going to be doing kind of a descant ostinato kind of thing over the top of all of this. And then I started creating the accompaniment. When you create choir parts in kind of a fluid movement, you're not really doing like, okay, the choir is singing this chord, and then they're singing this chord, and then they're singing this chord. Those of you who are songwriters know that you've got, you're going to do a chord, and then you're going to sing a little melody on top of that, and then you're going to change to another chord to change the mood a little bit, and then sing a little bit on that. When you're doing this with choir, you can do that, but something that makes the harmonization mesh with the melody a little more is to just create a more fluid transition from one harmonization to the next. This is the way hymns are written. The melody and then the harmonization underneath it is done more as additional lines. You're not really thinking in terms of like, first chord, second chord, third chord. You're thinking of soprano part, alto part, tenor part, and bass part. Now, when you stack them together, they form chords, and you have certain chords that land in certain areas, but in between that, you try to create a fluid transition with each of the parts moving somewhat independently of each other. And then, to create the accompaniment, we want to create something that is contrasting rhythmically, but then has a cohesive harmonization. And so basically, when I had the full score up, I looked at, okay, here's the choir notes, and what can I do with those same notes as the piano part rolls along and creates an arpeggiation that's creating more of a rhythmic element that can keep the pulse of the music going along as the choir is doing this more fluid thing. And of course, when we get it all done, you'll get to hear the results and see how you like it. So next, like I say, I'm having to do some rehearsing to prepare for recording. I like to thoroughly rehearse before a recording session so that I can get everything done in a few takes, rather than just going take after take after take, or having to, sometimes you have to pick things apart. And in that sense, then you end up with music that's kind of bolted together rather than put together. And it just has a different fluidity to it. So I like to be thoroughly rehearsed and then go into the recording session. And all of this is kind of making me think this week about the business of music, and how that is constantly changing. And I know a lot of my friends who are like me, or small-time players in the music business, were old enough to remember when things were a little different. And it's kind of easy to think that, well, back when it was this way, it was better, and we had the chance to make more money, and blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking about that, and there was a story that I heard from one of my music professors about the late Baroque composer George Frederick Handel, I know some people say, I think Georg Frederick Handel, but I always heard it as George, and I'm not a linguist. So, any rate, he is, of course, most famous for his piece, The Messiah, which gets performed by everybody at Christmas time. Well, leading up to that, Mr. Handel kind of reached his peak of success when he was living in England, and he was running at one time 3 opera companies. And if we look back at that time and place, big opera productions were really like the blockbuster movies of those times. So a lot of effort was put into these productions. The upper classes would pay good money to come and see these productions, and it was a profitable venture for Mr. Handel. But the King of England at that time was a very religious man and decided, well, opera was a sinful thing. All the acting and playing to be somebody you're not and all this other stuff. And they were always going on and on about Greek mythology and old legends. And he just didn't like that, so he sends out a decree that says no more opera. Well, this, of course, is putting Handel out of business, right? And a lot of other people. Apparently, according to the version of the story I heard, George had the ear of the king and through some means and went and said, hey, you're putting a lot of people out of work with this, maybe you ought to rethink it. Well, the king didn't exactly relent. He kind of said, well, the music's okay and having a story and all that, but I don't want any more acting and costumes, and I want you to do Bible stories because I'm tired of all this Greek mythology and blah, blah, blah. Well, now, of course, Mr. Handel has a choice. He can just stomp around and get mad about it, which I'm sure he was. Or he can say, okay, what can I do with the new environment? And that's when he composed The Messiah. All right, you want Bible stories? I'll give you a Bible story. The story of prophecy, life, and death of Jesus Christ. And he did it by just simply taking verses right out of the Bible, setting them to music in a big long oratorio. And the legend says that at its first performance, the king was there, and when he heard the Hallelujah chorus, he stood up. And everybody, of course, stood up with him because he was so moved by Handel's great effort. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But it makes a good story. And to this day, if you go to a performance of Handel's Messiah, when they get to the Hallelujah chorus, everybody stands up. So, looking at, kind of thinking about how this relates to my rereading of The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, one of the things that Pressfield talks about is, playing the game as it happens to exist, rather than complaining and trying to make the game something that it's not. One of the toughest lessons that I personally learned through getting a chronic kidney disease, I have polycystic kidney disease, it's a terminal condition, and the only treatment is a kidney transplant, which I got about 7 years ago. That whole experience taught me a very valuable lesson that I can't change the world around me. I can only change me and how I respond to it. And so the only thing I have control over is everything here. I have no control over anything beyond this point. Anything beyond the tip of my nose is outside of my control. And it doesn't make any sense to complain about that. Up until that time, I spent most of my music career fighting to get the environmental conditions that I wanted, that I thought would give me the exact scenario under which I could compose the great music that I was destined to compose. And of course, I got nowhere with that. And the metaphor that I like to use is, it's like a game of poker. You get the cards that are dealt, that's the hand you have to play. Now, most of the people I hang out with who are in the music game are people my age that are in their early 60s, late 50s. And we all remember back in the late 70s and 80s when it was all about recorded music. And I remember buying a ticket to see a top name hit making band at the Selland Arena here in Fresno, and it was $8 for that ticket. Here's a big concert, there's going to be 3 bands, $8 to see that concert. Now, if we translate those $1980 into $2025, that's about $32, compensating for inflation. When was the last time you saw a big concert for $30? I mean, most of the concert tickets I see are 100, 150 or more. So obviously the nature of the game has changed. Back in the day, the concert existed to promote record sales because that's where the money was. You were going to make the biggest bank for everybody involved by selling the most albums. Fast forward to today, it's kind of like it's flipped upside down, right? It's really difficult to make any money at all off of recorded music. Even for really big time stars, unless they get millions of streams, they're not really making that much money off of the music. And so, off the recorded part of it anyway, it's those live concerts which have now become these gigantic spectacles. That's really seems to be where they're making big bank. Now, I'm sure, like Taylor Swift makes plenty of money off of her recorded music, but I'll bet you that she makes more money off those big concert tours, as expensive as they are to put on. Well, again, you know, a lot of people I know, and myself included, have looked at this situation, and you know, when we look at what we're making off of live streaming, it can be a little disheartening. I think last year I earned a total of 25 cents in royalties. And of course, BMI is not going to write a check for 25 cents. So I'm literally making nothing off of my recorded music. Off of Bandcamp, when I first released my 2 first records, a few of them sold, and I think I made $15 off of that. And in selling CDs at live performances, I've maybe pulled in $50, $100 off of that. In ticket sales, off of the few paid concerts I've done in the last couple of years, I've made a lot more than that, several $100s. Of course, so far it hasn't turned into actual profit because it costs money to put these things together. The point is that, you know, the environment we're in is the environment we're in. The nature of the game is what it is, and we are kind of powerless to change that. We're not going to make people magically go back to the 1980s and pay $20 for an album and $8 for a concert. How would we react if we were only making $8 for a concert? But if we look at the situation, this is nothing new. George Frederick Handel had to face a changing environment and adapt to that environment. The environment in the music business has changed over and over and over and over again. And there are all kinds of ways in which musicians and composers have adapted to this new reality. If we go to the 19th century, classical music composers were making money off of publishing and live performances. But in some cases, they didn't sell their published works, they rented them, because there was more money to be made by renting out the music to the symphony orchestra that wanted to play your piece than to sell them the actual scores, and then that's it. As we get into the 20th century, the recording industry started to take off, and that changed the environment as well. And for the mid-20th century, the recording business was it. That was the big thing. Now in the 21st century, it seems like maybe other avenues, like live concerts and big video productions to go see those live concerts if you can't be there in person. There's all of these new avenues to try and make some money out of the music. Yes, it's tough for those of us who are the small players, and it seems easy for the big players. But I think at the end of the day, it's just up to us to find our path. Uh, I don't think it's really any different than starting an entrepreneurial venture. That's kind of what it is. I'm writing music. I'm hoping to monetize it in some way. That's a business. So those are my thoughts, what I've been thinking about as I'm practicing for my next recording session. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.